What if you could see the entire story of America? I mean, everything. From the Puritan arrivals to the battlefields of World War II, but see it all through the eyes of just one family. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. This isn't just some genealogy project. This is the American story told through the incredible lives of the Doolittles.
Okay, so let's be honest for a second. When you hear the name Doolittle, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably someone who, does little, right? A slacker, maybe? Well, what if I told you the real story behind that name is the exact opposite? And it actually starts with one of the most famous invasions in all of history.
Yeah, this just flips the whole thing on its head. The name Doolittle isn't a description. It's a place. It comes from De Doolita, a spot right on the coast of Normandy, and it was brought over to England during William the Conqueror's invasion way back in 1066. So, far from meaning lazy, this is the name of a Norman noble who was right there at a massive turning point in history.
And that noble origin story is what brings us across the Atlantic, right to the beginning of the American chapter. You see, every single Doolittle we're about to meet, every soldier, every artist, every senator, they can all trace their family line back to one man, a Puritan pioneer named Abraham Doolittle.
I mean, just think about the sheer courage of this guy. Abraham was born in England, but by the time he's only 20 years old, he and his wife Joan pack up and leave everything they've ever known to sail to America for religious freedom. They sailed into a complete unknown. By 1644, he's a trusted member of the New Haven colony, and by 1669, he's handpicked for the ultimate frontier challenge to literally carve a brand new town out of the wilderness.
Now, if you have any of those romantic paintings of colonial life in your head, just toss them out. The reality was so much harsher. We're talking about log cabins with dirt floors that they had to smear with clay to keep them hard. Glass windows? Forget it. That was a luxury they couldn't afford. They used oiled paper to try and block out those brutal New England winters. This was a life of pure, constant, day-to-day survival.
And that new settlement that Abraham helped build was named Wallingford, Connecticut. This little village, basically planted in the middle of a forest, became the heart, the cradle, really, of the entire Doolittle family in America. It's from this one spot on the map that all of his descendants would start to spread out, generation by generation, all across the continent.
And after a life of such huge change, of building a community from nothing, you might expect some grand tombstone, right? Nope. Abraham's final resting place is unbelievably humble. It's just a plain field stone with his initials carved into it. It's such a powerful reminder of the quiet, solid foundation this whole epic family story was built on.
Now, Abraham's kids and grandkids, they didn't just stay put in Wallingford. Of course not. As the colonies started to grow and eventually fight to become a nation, the Doolittles were right in the middle of it all, fighting for independence, pushing the frontier west, and even shaping the country's culture. So when the Revolutionary War kicked off, the Doolittles were ready. You had guys like Ensign Daniel Doolittle, a Minuteman, ready to grab his rifle and fight at a moment's notice. But then you get this story about Captain Uri Doolittle that is just amazing. He was wounded in the war, and years later the family took the silver handle from his officer's sword, melted it down, and had it made into spoons. They literally turned a weapon of war into something that would feed their family for generations.
And as the family pushed farther west, their lives were just this insane mix of pure grit and constant danger. The stories are unbelievable. You have one couple riding 70 miles on horseback in a single day, just to outrun a blizzard. Another Doolittle showed incredible ingenuity, building his own little mill just so his family could grind corn for Johnny cakes. And then there's just pure terror. Imagine being Anthony Doolittle's family trapped in your tiny cabin all night long while a pack of wolves is howling and trying to get in. But it wasn't all just about fighting and farming. They had this creative side too. During the War of 1812, a guy named Eliakim Doolittle wrote a song about a big American naval victory, and it got super popular. It just goes to show you, the Doolittles were helping to write the cultural story of America, not just its political and military history. As America got bigger and, frankly, a lot more complicated, so did the Doolittle family. Once you get into the 19th century, you start to see them popping up in the most unexpected places, taking these incredibly different, sometimes completely opposite, paths in life. The contrast here is just wild. On one hand, you've got Amos Doolittle, a true artist, a patriot. In 1775, he was one of only 4 engravers in the entire colonies. He became so important, they called him the father of the art in this country. Then you have a totally different American experience. 100 years later, on the frontier, John Doolittle's wife opens her door to find the infamous Younger Brothers gang, wanted outlaws on the run. What does she do? she calmly serves them dinner. The very next day, they're captured in a massive shootout just a half-mile from her farm. And that spirit of ingenuity just keeps showing up. Check this out. Isaac Doolittle gets captured and is held as a prisoner of war in France. Instead of just sitting there, he learns to speak French, studies their technology, and when he gets back, he introduces the art of lithography to the United States. Or how about George Doolittle, a shoemaker? He enlists in the Civil War, and the whole time he carries his shoemaking tools with him, mending his buddy's boots on the march.
So you have this long history of service, of skill, of grit, and it all builds up to a climax in the modern era, where we find some of the family's most celebrated and decorated heroes. During the Civil War, a few of the Doolittle men served in one of the most elite units you could possibly join, Berdan's sharpshooters, and get a load of the entry test. To even be considered, you had to fire 10 shots in a row at a target 200 yards away, and every single one of those 10 shots had to land within 5 inches of the bullseye. These guys were the absolute best of the best.
And that incredible tradition of elite service passed down through the generations leads us to maybe the most famous Doolittle of them all. The entire family's legacy of bravery can almost be summed up by this one single award, the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest medal for valor the United States can give.
And that medal was awarded to General James "Jimmy" Doolittle, the legendary pilot who led that incredibly daring raid on Tokyo in 1942. But the Medal of Honor was just one of his awards. The list is just staggering. But here's what makes him truly remarkable. He wasn't just a warrior. He also held a doctorate of science from MIT. Think about that. He was a brilliant engineer and a true aviation pioneer, and one of America's greatest military heroes.
And while the military heroes are maybe the most famous, the Doolittle legacy is so much broader than that. From that one Puritan farmer, the family tree just exploded, producing leaders in every field you can think of: doctors, judges, members of Congress, even a U.S. senator. They helped build America in the courtroom, in the hospital, and in the halls of government, not just on the battlefield.
So, from a Norman noble to a Puritan pioneer, from Revolutionary War soldiers to guys having dinner with outlaws, from America's first artists to its greatest modern heroes, the story of the Doolittles proves just how much of a nation's history can be hiding inside a single family name. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? What stories, what heroes, innovators, or maybe even a few outlaws are waiting to be discovered in yours?